This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
It is time yet again for a new season here on Michigan Podcast. If you can believe it, season number 8. But first, before we look ahead, we must look back to the glory that was 2023. We'll do that next year on the season premiere of Michigan Podcast next.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hip. Caught.
They said you can't beat Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to our season premiere. That's right, hard to believe. Season number 8 of Michigan Podcast underway here this week. And the 2024 season is underway here in just about 2 months. Big Ten Media Days are just about 40 days away. So we're going to get into how I begin my season preview breakdown every single year with my coaching power rankings. We're going to do those with Mark Rogers coming up a little bit later on. But before we talk about what lies in front of us, I think we would be remiss as Michigan fans if we did not take a step back and just reminisce one final time in the gloriousness that was 2023. I am wearing my Blake Corum Rose Bowl replica jersey today, even with the old school patches on it. Being at that game, being in Pasadena, sharing that with my wife and my son. I mean, I'll never forget it the rest of my life. A perfect day, a perfect game, a perfect ending, a perfect setting. It ended up being the final game of 2 of the great college football coaches ever. Nick Saban, maybe the greatest coach ever. And then Jim Harbaugh, who might now be cemented as the greatest Michigan coach ever. Certainly, this has been the greatest run of Michigan football ever. As great as this program has been, it's never won 3 undisputed and unshared Big Ten championships in a row, and it's done that now. And it just won its first undisputed national championship since 1947. But more importantly, I want to share with you a sentiment that I've heard from several of you, that I've had myself, and I first heard it from a good friend of mine who's probably watching today, and some of you would know him. I don't want to name him just in case it would get him into trouble. But he's, let's just say, a Michigan fan and supporter that has a bit of a following. And as we have watched what has transpired in this offseason, the brain drain of coaches, and you're going to see that here in the next segment. I mean, I've got James Franklin, a top 10 football coach right now. And as Michigan fans, we love playing James Franklin. He's been known to gift wrap wins to us. I think that's kind of indicative of just how uncertain the future landscape of college football is outside of a couple of programs because the transition that is taking place. And then you look at the larger transition as well. I don't have a moral argument at all that labor should be paid. The Lord says the worker is worth his hire. And clearly for many players, the value of a scholarship, even with cost of attendance, does not equate what their actual value is in an open market. And now that schools are making hundreds of millions of dollars on their behalf, they should be getting compensated more than a scholarship on their own behalf. I have no problem with that. But today there's a headline as we're recording this episode. The NC State men's basketball program, guys in their 60s now, they won a national championship over 40 years ago for Jimmy Valvano, suing the NCAA for back NIL from 41 years ago. Guys in their 60s. I don't know what the future holds. I don't. And I listen to Joel Klatt, who I adore. I listen to his podcast saying this is the golden era of college football. I'm not so sure of that. You know, growing up in the 70s and 80s as a kid, if you would jump in the DeLorean and hop back to 1981, 82 and find a 6, 7, 8-year-old Steve Dace and tell him, when you're a dad, Steve, you're not going to drive through the neighborhoods of America and see kids playing pickup baseball in sandlots anymore. I'd have told you were crazy. We all get up on Saturday mornings. We all watched Johnny Bench and the Baseball Bunch. We all watched Mel Allen hosting This Week in Baseball. We all watched it. We all watched the NBC Game of the Week. Vince Scully and Joe Garagiola. And then Bob Costas and Tony Kubek were the B team. These were staples. I mean, it was just a rite of passage. We played baseball all day long. Now nobody does. Now baseball is at best the national pastime. It's at best the third most popular team sport in America right now. Fourth, if you break pro and college football out. College and pro football are number 1 and 2, and they're way ahead of everybody else. How did this happen? Well, in 1994, they decided to have a strike. They canceled the World Series. They gave people the first taste that they could live without their sport. Then they came back after that. They had a steroid era. All kinds of records and stuff were broken. People were excited about baseball again. It was hot. It was chic again. Chicks dig the long ball. And then you found out that a lot of it was manufactured by steroids. So double whammy. They cancel the World Series, and then they rebound with heroic exploits because dudes were able to grow via pharmaceutical second heads and hit 50 home runs at 40 years old. And the game's just not recovered from it. There were other eras in this country where if you would have said horse racing won't matter that much, boxing won't really be that big of a deal, people would have told you we're nuts. So this idea that this is just going to automatically carry on forever is not true. As much as I love this sport, other than my faith and my family, and it's a distant third, but it's third on the list, nothing's brought me more joy in life than my love of college football. Didn't always have the greatest childhood growing up. Michigan games were often an escape for me. We can't sit here and say, as they are, if they're not shooting the goose that laid the golden egg, man, they're loading the weapon. They're at least thinking about it. How much blood can we drain from this turnip? How much more how many juice can we squeeze? How much more juice from the orange can we squeeze? The idea that this will just go on forever. I mean, there's some parts about this I'm excited about. I mean, the matchups every week now are way better than what we used to get every week. Now, the cost of that, prohibitive. Conferences no longer exist. Schools no longer matter. Soon, that will mean opportunities kids won't, in other sports, will no longer have because their football programs are irrelevant. Was it worth it? I don't know. We'll find out. But this is the undiscovered country that we are heading into here as college football fans. We don't know what the future will hold. We don't know that it will be better than ever before. We do know that 60-year-old men are filing 40-year-old NIL lawsuits against the NCAA. We do know that a third-string running back went into Mike Loxley's locker room at Maryland this spring and demanded $100,000 or he was transferring. A third-string running back at Maryland. We do know that. Here at Michigan, we've seen kids who were no-brainer recruits kick us to the curb to go sign with Kentucky for a bag. They'd rather finish 10th place in the SEC every year, I guess. So nothing is certain. We don't know. We have no idea where this is going to go. And anyone who tells you they do is wrong. Pandora's box is opened. All the restraints are gone. Now, It could be better. It could be. I just said, hey, week to week, we're getting better matchups now than ever before with the strength of these conferences, particularly in the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10. Could be more entertaining. I'm excited about a 12-team playoff and seeing playoff games on campus sites. That'll be very cool. And I actually love incorporating the bowls because I'm old school now at 50, and I love the fact that there's still a Rose Bowl on New Year's Day at 5 o'clock Eastern there over the San Gabriel Mountains. I love that. So I'm excited about that. I don't want to completely, I want to be self-aware. I want to contemplate that I could just be the get off your lawn guy now. I get that because I miss 9 bowl games on New Year's Day and then the season was done and we argued about it all winter and had split champions. I miss those days, I miss the regionalization aspect of it. Was it better or was it just good because that's where I grew up? I don't know. It could be better, but the idea that that's a guarantee is not true. The idea that this gravy train will continue on forever is not true. The idea that this thing is idiot-proof, just ask Major League Baseball, boxing, and horse racing, it's not true. It's not. And that's why, going back to my buddy I mentioned a few minutes ago, there is something uniquely satisfying about the fact that we won it all the last year we know we had college football as we've always loved it and enjoyed it. And to me, that is like Avengers Endgame, the perfect ending. It could not have made a better closing movie to the MCU. I know there's still an MCU, but it's a shadow of its former self. It's chase after other items instead of just telling great stories, and the box office has tanked accordingly. I'll never forget that feeling of walking out of the theater in 2019 at Endgame, realizing they did the thing. They did the thing. And I got to watch this with my kids as they grew up and get embroiled in it and excited about it and share this with them. And those are memories I'll never forget. And on a grander scale, that's the way it felt walking out of that Rose Bowl New Year's night. That's the way it felt sitting in my Michigan man cave here in Iowa on a bitterly cold January evening after the national championship game. The feeling like they really could ruin this thing, but they can't ruin that thing. There could not be a better ending. It could not be more poetic than the Victors Valiant, the winningest program of all time, the team that invented two-platoon play, the team that created the Big Ten Conference, the team with the most All-Americans, the biggest fan base, the biggest alumni base, and arguably the greatest history in the sport. Won it all. Won it all. And the old-fashioned way with the team. Jimmy's line that this is the team that Bo was talking about 40 years ago with that famous speech still rings true. Winning it with this kind of a team where guys were in it for the team and not just themselves, for the fans and for the school and not just for themselves. And winning it the way they did, old-fashioned football blocking and tackling, defense, and winning it all in what could very well be the last year of college football as we know for sure we've always known and loved it. There could not be a more perfect ending. So revel in that. They cannot take that away from us. No matter what they try to do to this sport moving forward, we're always going to have that year and that team. Let us never forget it. And that's why I wanted to open up this season by remembering it one more time. Go Blue. So after a fond look back, it is now time to turn the page and get 2024 underway. Let's bring in our good friend to help us do that, Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Check out his great page right here on YouTube as well, especially this time of year with correspondents all over the country getting a lot of great preseason information for those win totals. Hint, hint. All right. And then also, Mark might be very well the only reasonable Buckeye left in America. Although I can see, Mark, as much as I love you, brother, with every passing Michigan win, that reason is slowly but surely leaving. And your testiness and sensitivity, I have noticed on Twitter, is amping up, brother. Good to see you, man. How are you?
Oh, it could be just a post here and there. For example, I noted that, hey, if you're under the age of 5 years old and you're a Michigan fan, you've got all the reason to boast. And if you're over 100, those two categories, Michigan has it on Ohio State fans 2-1. If you're under 5 or over 100, absolutely.
All it took, folks, 3 straight beatdowns for that last ounce of reason to leave Mark's body. Nevertheless, we will trudge on. I'm empathetic. I was there for 20 years. All right, Mark, so let's get to it. Let's start talking about this coming season. The first thing I do when I get ready to assemble my college football preview each and every year is my coaching power ratings. And I have to tell you, this year, it's the hardest I've ever had to do it because this sport has suffered, not just with our guy, Jimmy leaving, but by and large, a serious brain drain in this sport. And I'm not sure how many teams I think have a decisive coaching advantage in a given week because the track records of a lot of these coaches that remain are pretty similar by and large. So before we get to my specific rankings and how I do them, just kind of your, meta thoughts on just the state of coaching in college football, like I was just talking about.
So, Steve, you made a similar comment on my show when we had you on about 10 days ago. And so just a few minutes ago, I made this list. These are coaches that I think are successful to a certain degree, have contributed to the sport. So these are the coaches that have been added to the sport, to the coaching pool over the last 5 or 6 years. Mike Elko, Bill O'Brien, Chris Kleiman, Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning. Those are the only coaches I could come up with. And I went through all the standings just to make sure I didn't miss anyone who I think have made a reasonable contribution, have been successful to some degree. Okay, these are the coaching losses during that same time frame. Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, Urban Meyer, Chris Peterson, David Shaw, Mark Richt, Mike Leach, Art Briles, Gary Patterson, Pat Fitzgerald, Chip Kelly, Dan Mullen, Les Miles, Jimbo Fisher.
Wow. That says it all right there, brother. That's incredible. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, there are numerous, no question, no doubt, Hall of Famers in that second group there. I mean, that's incredible. All right, so let's get to how, for those of you that don't recall, even though we've been doing this for 8 years now, that's right, this is season 8 of Michigan Podcast now, if you can believe it. But here's how I put my coaching rankings together every single year. All right, so each coach gets graded 1 through 10 on their Power 5 head coaching overall resume. So this assesses what each head coach has done strictly as a Power 4. I got to correct that. I keep forgetting that. Power 4 head coach, okay? Non-Power 4 head coaching resume overall. So this assesses what each coach has done 1 through 5 as whether they're a group of 5 head coach, whether they were an assistant coach in a power league, an NFL head coach / assistant coach. And then there's what I call the current coaching trajectory. We judge that 1 through 10 to get to where we are at right now, assessing whether the needle for the next 4 years or a full recruiting cycle is pointed up or down at this stage for each coach's career. Then there's what I call my big game bonus. That's 1 to 3 points. Coaches known for producing in big games as a head coach at the Power 4 level. Keep forgetting that. I got to correct that. Given a bonus of 1 to 3 points. And then there's Mark's favorite category. And by favorite, I mean least, the Hall of Fame bonus. Coaches that are obviously destined for the College Football Hall of Fame for college coaching only, based on their accomplishments up to this point, they are given 3 bonus points. So your overall thoughts on this metric that I created 8 years ago for power ranking coaches every season?
For several categories, I love them. I think they're right on point. I think you're really hitting to the heart of trying to be simplistic and practical, but also trying to be comprehensive across the board and gain and really bring in anything that really matters. The issue I have with the Hall of Fame, so I'll get there, would be if you stated these are the coaches I believe are Hall of Fame coaches or on a trajectory to be in my Hall of Fame. I give you more credit, Steve, for being able to place coaches in the Hall of Fame than the actual Hall of Fame does. Because I think that they're in their rigidity, their requirements, their rules, they have missed a whole lot of context and missed out on a whole lot of guidelines are good. Rules in this case, not so good in my eyes. So the 60% and the 10 years of coaching, all of that business, I think is a bit ridiculous. Guidelines, good. But let's put it into context and use some people that are experts. So if you were for example, I've gone through history and I've rewritten the national championship log. Now, some people discredit that and say, oh, you can't change. I understand that I don't have the power to do that. But for my own, in trying to evaluate and in trying to reward performance, that's what I do. And I think it's legitimate and credible to go back and say, hey, in this particular season, 1994, Penn State earned a national championship just as much as Nebraska did. So that's the only issue I have with the Hall of Fame is I trust you more than I trust the Hall of Fame. And so I would trust even though it would be more of a subjective measure. And then also if you had something along the lines of, and this would be pretty subjective, recruiter / in-game coach, their ability. And I know the big game coaching metric there with the 1 through 3 is kind of at the heart of their ability as an in-game coach and taking away from the guys that botch calls on the sideline and don't manage a game well. So I know you're getting to the heart of that, but more, I guess, recruiter and in-game coach assessment.
So your biggest criticism is I need to give more of my own opinions. I think I can live with that. All right. All right, let's get to this year's coaching rankings. Let's start at the top. All right, so these are my top 16 coaches. Kirby Smart of Georgia is number 1. Dabo Swinney is number 2. Brian Kelly is number 3. Kyle Whittingham 4. Chris Kleiman really benefits from the Hall of Fame bonus. He's now eligible for that. I think when you combine what he did at North Dakota State with here, he would absolutely be in the Hall of Fame. Ryan Day is next. It just goes to show the kind of brain drain this sport has suffered, that my metric puts James Franklin as the number 7 best coach in the country. But when I look at the list below, he wouldn't be much lower than that, frankly. You know, if you want to put, Mike Gundy ahead of him, I'm okay with that. You want to put Lincoln Riley and Matt Campbell ahead of him, I'm okay with that. But it's not like he wouldn't be somewhere on this first screen, frankly, looking at, who's there. So we're really just talking about ranges. So when you take a look now at my top 16 coaches, you can see the score. You can see how close a lot of these are. If you're wondering what italics means, if the guy's italicized, it's its first year at a new school. All right, so your thoughts on these rankings here right now.
Well, in regards to James Franklin, I don't think it's ridiculous that you have him ranked 7th. I've got him at 17th, and a lot of people would think, oh, well, Mark, you're scolding Steve for having him up at number 7. I just think it's that close. Once you get to that range past Ryan Day, and you could even include Ryan Day, that you can go for a series of 10, 12, 15 within this rankings, and it's so close to rate and evaluate these coaches. The one
like back to Franklin, pardon me for just a second, Mark, back to Franklin. The reason he's on that list also is the Hall of Fame bonus. He now is eligible for the Hall of Fame as well. And when you look at what he did at Vanderbilt, which is the best success that school's had in like a century, on top of what he's done at Penn State, I gave him the Hall of Fame bonus. I think he would make it if he stopped coaching today. You agree or disagree with that?
Well, it sounds like another good reason to get rid of the Hall of Fame metric. So the thing I'll say about James Franklin, and I just responded to a call to my channel just a few hours ago about James Franklin, or the criticism of, if you're looking at Joe Paterno's final 15 to 20 years at Penn State, James Franklin is basically doing a more consistent version of Joe Paterno's final years at Penn State. And this wasn't mostly bad Joe Paterno. This is just a lot of 10-3s, 11-2s that weren't breaking through for championships. The school's only won 4 in the Big Ten in 31 years, and James Franklin's responsible for 1 of those.
When they joined in 1993, you think they thought they were going to win 4 Big Ten championships in 31 years? No.
I didn't think they'd win 4.
And I didn't think they'd win only 4 either, but that's where we are. All right, so let's go to the next tier now. Mike Norvell, one of the big leapers this year. Sonny Dykes is one that I struggled with. I wondered whether to pull the Phil Steele and put my finger on the scale. But when I looked at his metric and realized that the number one reason why he's trending still this high after a disappointing year is, his program maybe more than anyone else is set up to take advantage of the new Big 12 conference. They might now have the best recruiting base in the new Big 12 conference. Okay, so I'll keep him there one more year. They go like 5-7, 6-6 again this year. I'm going to drop him. He's going to drop quite a bit. Lance Leipold, who has taken Kansas from joke to now they're maybe a preseason top 25 team. Dave Doran, I think, is very underrated. Dave Clawson, I didn't drop him too much for a terrible year at Wake Forest last year because of his body of work. Dan Lanning's a big mover from where he was in year 1. So when you take a look now here at the second tier of coaches, you're seeing guys like Matt Rule, PJ Fleck, Brett Bielema, Pat Narduzzi, Hugh Freeze, by and large being credited for their track record of success more so than where their programs are right now or have been recently.
So PJ Fleck and Brett Bielema, to me, would be the coaches that are ranked the highest, and I think it's appropriate but are at programs that may have the biggest challenge, aside from Dave Clawson. Okay, Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, absolutely, and we'll see what happens with the ACC and Wake's ability to even stay in a power conference. But Minnesota, Illinois, just huge challenges for them to continue to win, and for PJ Fleck to continue to win, and for Brett Bielema to do anything at Illinois, even though I have great respect for his coaching ability. Dave Doran is an interesting one here, because I am guessing that the college football universe has changed its perception little on Dave Doran and NC State. Mm-hmm. I have 2 videos out there that are 4 and 5 and 6 years old, something in that range, that are basically saying, why does Dave Doran still have a job at NC State? At one point, he was winning 37% of his conference games, 21 and 35, and basically had a formula of beating up on Old Dominion and East Carolina outside the conference, getting to bowl games, going 7 and 5, going 3 and 5 in the ACC, and everybody thinking, the guy's a decent coach, he's getting the job done. But he's 23 after that 21 and 35 conference record over his first, whatever that would be, 8 seasons, 23 and 11 in the ACC. So I don't think the perception is that he's done a much better job in the last several seasons, but he certainly has.
By the way, I should have mentioned this too, Mark, on ties. How are those settled? The first tiebreaker is your current coaching trajectory. All right, where I think you're heading as a program is the first tiebreaker. If there's still a tie after that, then I just break the tie myself. Okay, so just so people know that. All right, next page of coaches. We're going to get to more of the first-year coaches here. Sharon Moore and Mike Elko are the second 2 highest rated rookie coaches at their respective schools after Kalen DeBoer. Sharon Moore, I had 2 ways to go. I could just give him a full 5 for his non-power conference coaching resume and nothing as a head coach and just give all those wins to Jimmy. I decided to give him at 1 point because that's what I did with Ryan Day when he filled in for Urban Meyer. So I just went with that precedent as well. And then I gave Sharon 4 points for his non-power coaching resume because I thought that would just kind of even it out. And you see Jonathan Smith of Michigan State there, right there with them. Bill O'Brien not far behind. Jed Fish at Washington was a big mover from where he was rated last year. So your thought, Neil Brown moved up quite a bit. Dave Aranda, I think, is the biggest dropper. And we'll get to those at the end. I always tell you what my 5 biggest risers and droppers are every year in my coach ratings. Brett Pry, who had a sneaky, respectable year in year 2 at Virginia Tech. So what do you think of this category of coaches here?
I think it's an interesting smattering of guys that have had some element of success there. You mentioned Brent Pry. Justin Fuente really ran that program into the ground. He seems to be doing a nice job coming off a 7-6 year and a bowl victory. And there are nice expectations for him and his team this year with a lot of returning production and a pretty darn good football team. But then, and you've got some other guys that have, again, sprinkling of success. Mike Elko, I'm super high on Mike Elko, considering Duke had lost 16 of 17 ACC games when he took over there. He had basically exactly the same personnel as David Cutcliffe, and he came within a drive of going to an ACC championship game, had a lead on Florida State and Tallahassee in the third quarter last year before Riley Leonard got hurt. I just think absolutely he's one of those it factor guys. I think he's really good, and he's an up-and-comer. Then you've got your just staunch, just stable Greg Schiano, Bill O'Brien. I don't think they're moving in any one direction, one way or the other. They're just really good football coaches, can build programs. I think Bill O'Brien's a good fit for BC.
Agreed.
Limited expectations. Schiano, the same thing at Rutgers.
I agree. And I think that if Bill O'Brien had left, or I think if Jimmy had taken the Broncos job last year, I think it's very possible Bill O'Brien would be the coach at Michigan right now. All right, next up, I think we're going to close out the list here. You see, we start at the top with Billy Napier of Florida, Shane Beamer at South Carolina, Sam Pittman, who's everybody's favorite coach on the hot seat there, Deion Sanders, really difficult where to rank him, Willie Fritz, who had a good resume prior to the disaster at Florida State, David Braun, who put forth one of the greatest single-season coaching jobs I've ever seen in the Big Ten, maybe the greatest in 1 year. And then my last rated power conference coach is Deshaun Foster at UCLA. Who do you think is primed here to be a breakout candidate based on what they will do this year? My vote, by the way, on this list here would actually go to Fran Brown at Syracuse. That would be my vote. When you look at their schedule, and I think that Kyle McCord will do a fine job at quarterback for them. So he would be the guy that I would pick as most likely to break out of this list a year from now.
So Fran Brown was the recruiter of the year based on several organizations recruiting evaluations while at Georgia, and the easy connection to make there as well. Yeah, he's at Georgia. Of course, he's the recruiter of the year. But the early returns at Syracuse is that he is doing making similar inroads at Syracuse, and really has upped the recruiting there. So I agree on the Fran Brown in terms of his early returns. Clark Lee, that should be the slam dunk answer right there, because he proclaimed a couple summers ago at SEC Media Days that he was going to have the greatest program in college football. So he should be the guy. But David Braun, what he did at Northwestern was remarkable. Deion Sanders, so he's the biggest wild card on the list here. There's no question about that. Does this approach work or does it not work? I was looking at an article a couple of weeks ago in The Athletic that just spelled out and explained the stark contrast between, let's say, a Matt Rule, and it had this ridiculous run of high school visits and just the grind that he takes on in high school football recruiting, like 500 high schools he's visited, because it was paralleling that they were hired the same month at their respective schools, and throwing out all these statistics of the grind that Matt Rule has logged, hustling for Nebraska, and basically putting zeros next to all Deion's name. Hasn't visited anyone, hasn't gone to any high schools, zero. Basically, I'm the show, I'm the personality, come to me, and I'll make you a star. I don't know if that's setting him up for the next job, I guess. I don't know that that's a long-term successful formula at Colorado.
We will get an idea, and maybe he's learned the overtime rule since last year. We will get an idea how good of a coach Deion is, because my power ratings right now, as I am assembling them for my preview, look like they're going to have almost 3/4 of Colorado's games this year point spread at somewhere between 7 to 9 points. All right. So that's a lot of toss-up games on the schedule. A big difference in coaching will be the difference between 4-8 and 8-4 for that team this year. All right, so biggest risers and fallers from where they were a year ago in my coaching power ratings. All right, so the biggest risers, Steve Sarkisian went up 27 spots, Kalen DeBoer 21. Not surprisingly, they took their teams to the college football playoff last year. Lance Leipold up 20 spots, Mike Norvell up 20 spots, Dan Lanning, who should have taken his team to the college football playoff last year, up 19. Mike Norvell should have been in the college football playoff last year as well. All right, biggest fallers, Dave Aranda down 30 spots. That's one of the biggest drops in the entire history of the 8 years I've been doing this. Sam Pittman down 15 spots, Brett Bielema 10, PJ Fleck 8, Kalani Sitake at BYU, who I think's on the hot seat, down 7 spots. So those are the biggest risers and fallers as we close this out. Anything stick out to you there? And then, Mark, give us a prediction right now for a name in each category that you think will be on that list a year from now as as one of the biggest risers and one of the biggest fallers.
So right out of the gate, Brett Bielema and PJ Fleck are the most capable coaches among the fallers. I'm not discounting in any way the poor seasons that they had. And I think PJ Fleck's in particular in a rough spot right now and really going to have to prove something this season. But I think that they're really good football coaches and don't belong in a bad coaching category, but it's just flat out the resume has taken a hit. And Dave Aranda, you take away that just aberration of a season in winning the Big 12 championship. He's done a poor job at Baylor. Sark, you made the comment on my show a couple weeks ago, and I've certainly made it a number of times. Look at the jobs that he has had in this sport, and it has been nothing but mediocrity and failing to meet the standards of his successor and predecessor at all those schools until last year. So, of course, he's got to back it up, and the expectations are huge. Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. I think he's just proven it. When you can go to multiple stops, and maybe that's another factor you could consider in this, and I certainly do. When a guy can do it at multiple stops, he has proven that it's not just a situation or just not a right fit, but he can go anywhere and get the job done. To your next question concerning risers and fallers.
Yeah, give me one prediction in each category for a year from now.
Yeah, let's go with, I am going to go long-term, maybe beyond this season with Jonathan Smith. Now, that's a post-2024 prediction, but he's the first one that came to mind as a guy that I just think is a tremendous football coach and will have some ability at Michigan State, free of Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan every year to maybe make some inroads in the Big Ten. And in terms of a faller, Eli Drinkwitz, what has he really proven? I know that he's got a good place here for 2024. Again, I think this is more of a long-term possible prediction that he had a sub-500 record at Mizzou, and I think he's been given a whole lot of credit. And I think we tend to do this in this sport. You have one good season, you get the contract extension, they're afraid to lose you, and typically it's a matter of jumping the gun.
Good stuff, my friend. Thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. And our first Twitter poll results of Season 8, true or false. All the changes in college football will make it better than ever. This is what Joel Klatt at Fox News is saying. 76% of you, though, are not buying that. Only 24% of you said true. 76% of you said that may not be the case. And I'm not sure. I think it's certainly possible it may not. And that's why I said in the open, I will forever cherish the fact that we won it all the last year we had college football as we've always known and loved it. That brings us to our feedback of the week. In response to the poll results, we hear from a Buckeye named Sean Duffy who says the problem is these changes have almost nothing to do with the fans, has almost everything to do with maximizing profit for all participating parties from the school to the player. And that is correct. I mean, when you get charged money to tailgate at college football playoff games, I mean, you don't have enough money. Right. I mean, listen, man, I'm a capitalist, okay, but I'm not a materialist. There is a such thing as enough money. There is a such thing as too much money. All right, there is. Just making money for money's sake, there's nothing moral in that whatsoever. Okay, so I agree with Sean. This Wolverine agrees with that Buckeye that it is no guarantee that moving forward things are going to be as good as they were all these years prior. But we shall find out because the new season now is upon us. Let us know what you think about what we think. You can follow us on Twitter in between episodes at Michigan Podcast. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, follow, share, 5-star review, whether you're watching here on YouTube or listening on iTunes or elsewhere. We would love it if you did those things. They help us to find more Michigan fans just like you, and we appreciate all of you that have done those things for us already. Until the next time, we'll see you again in 2 weeks right here on Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.